Hey Yoru, how's it going? So let's take a look at the bus. Um, I did start going into it and I made a few modifications to your hierarchy as well as your tires. So I kind of deleted all of your tires except for this front tire here. And basically, I kind of broke it up so that you have your tire, which is the wheel, as well as the central piece, so you could actually have eventually we'll get them to be able to steer. And then there's the axis, which is the part that connects to the wheel, and that's going to be a separate element. So once I kind of labeled that and broke it up into its individual groups, I just kind of duplicated it out and moved this one back. So now we have the rear tire group and just made sure everything's kind of labeled, right? So we have the tire, we've got the hub, I don't know what that's called technically, and then we've got the axle, sorry, which is this. And then once I had that, I just grouped those together. So we have our left tires, and then I duplicated it, mirrored it, and then we have our right tires. Another thing I was thinking we could do as well is use these nonlinear deformers. So we have squash and stretch and bend and a whole bunch of cool things to make this kind of a really neat kind of flexible model. So it'd be neat if, as we're moving this guy around, that the tires stay locked on the ground. So that's kind of why I've moved them out into their own group, so that we can actually do a bit of a rig that kind of keeps these guys anchored and rolling around on the ground. And then we have the main bus group, which is this guy. And then on top of that, we then have our driver, which will be inside that group. So I'm a bit torn in terms of how we should approach this. And then we've got these mirrors too, which will be kind of sitting connected. So these guys, I'm actually thinking they should actually come out too. So let me just unparent those. And those are just going to go in here. We're going to connect those similar to how I've started connecting these tires in. So what I did with the tires, if I were to just go in here, is I've kind of added a triangular surface. So I'm basically using the multi-cut tool just to create a cross section where the tires are connected, just like this. And then what I did is I selected these middle points one at a time, and I added a special kind of constraint that's new in the newest version of Maya, which this looks like it's the rivet tool. This has been around for like 15, 20 years almost, probably, I would say about that. And it looks like they finally incorporated it into Maya. Essentially what this does is you can select any point or any number of points, and it basically creates a locator that stays locked to the surface. The cool thing too is that if I were to even just move any point around there, this is going to stay tangent to the surface as well. So that's kind of a neat thing they've added in recently. Again, it's been around forever as the rivet tool, but they've included that. So I've kind of done that for these cross sections. So I've selected these vertices here, and again, one at a time, I've gone in and just added a rivet. So I've got 4 of these rivets in total as a result. Now, for some reason, this guy was giving me some problems. I actually ended up deleting the face, reattaching the crosshatch, and it's on a bit of an angle, but it looks like if I were to grab that point, it looks like it's stuck there. So that's kind of what I want. The reason for that is when I'm doing squash and stretch on the bus, maybe I don't want those tires to squash and stretch with the rest of the body. Maybe I want those to stay more circular. Now, if you're okay with the tires kind of squashing and stretching with everything, then maybe you can just keep those as part of the overall group. As essentially what I want to do is just select the bus, go into our deformer set, and we've got these guys here, these nonlinear deformers, which there we are, looking right at. And there's a whole bunch that we can add. So for example, like the bend deformer, what it does is it throws let me just show all here, throws a line through your object, right? And then on that, or to close some of this stuff, you get an input, and essentially what we can do is we can control the angle at which it bends. So let me just rotate it to the side, so 90 degrees. Maybe increase the high bound or the low bound so that it bends a little bit higher up, like closer to the base here. So what we can do then is just with this curvature, we can kind of move it around this way. Now, again, it's not quite what I want here. Let me just go back to -1 and 1. I do want to keep it kind of planted on the ground here, so I'm just going to maybe, I think I just did the opposite. Let me just move that down. There we go. Just to about where the bottom of the bus is there. Something like that. Right, so we can actually go into this curvature and move it around, and already it's almost just like that video that we saw, right? So as I was mentioning, if you're okay with the tires kind of getting squishing in, but I'm thinking because we can keep those separate, let me delete that. Because we can keep those separate, so let me go in and just add, let me just rearrange this. We got tires under here. Whoops, tires underneath there. There we go. The driver and the bus. Same thing, so I'm going to add in the bend. So it's 90 degrees. Yeah, there we go. So let me go in and move that down a bit here. Just so that the bottom doesn't move so much. Cool. So, you know, we can actually keep the tires moving and rotating, and we can have little controls that can move them up and down if we want to create a bit of that illusion like it's bumping over the surface. So again, we can create like little controls to control this, which is cool. It's a non-linear deformer, so you can actually do some neat things. I can even just kind of rotate this around through there. I can even angle this around in there. You wouldn't want to do that. That's kind of funky. Actually, it's giving me a bit of a headache looking at that. But for the most part, you know, we want that just probably moving back and forward probably. So I think that was at 90 degrees. So we can get like this cool thing. So the next thing we want to do is maybe add in a little bit of squash and stretch into it. So let's do that next. All right. Sorry, I was just checking a notification. There we go. So I'm going to keep that one. We can layer these, which is cool too, these non-linears. So squash, let's check that guy out. So it's the same thing. So on the squash deform, whoops, let me just zero that. I want to add the squash to the same stuff, so the driver and the bus. So squash, there we go. So same thing, we can increase the factor, and it's going to squish and squash that bus. Now, where this squishes and squashes, we can raise and lower this guy. And this one's actually better to control through the low bounds, which is this point, or the high bounds, which is this point. So we can raise or lower these guys. So I'm just going to raise this up and lower this down a bit so that this is actually going to be at the base of the bus. So something around there, right? So that this isn't moving quite as much. Yeah, something around there. So all I'm doing is lifting the deformer up and down. And we've got also some smoothing values we can add. So we can kind of smooth this out just a bit if we wanted to soften that transition near the hubcaps, or maybe soften the transition near the top. And, you know, let me just maybe level 3 smoothness on that. There we go, that looks cool. So we can go in and now with that squash, you know, we can have a little bit of cool squash and stretch. And we can set minimum maximum, so it doesn't have to be nearly as much as that. You can see the little driver dude is in there doing his thing. The neat thing too is that we could always go in and move him inside there, right? We can kind of shift him around within the distortion. All right, so that's working. So let's go back into that deformer and zero that. The last one I wanted to add was a bit of a twist deformer. This could be neat to get a little bit of twisting through the length of the bust. So we've got the same thing. So driver and bus, and I'm going to add in a bit of a twist. And I'm just going to angle it this way, so 90 and 90. Oh, that's exactly 90. How did that even happen? And the cool thing with this is that then we can go into our start angle, and I can twist things this way. Or the end angle, I can twist things this way. And what I might want to do is lower it down just a bit, so it's, or raise it, yeah, lower it down just a tiny little bit. So it's twisting a little bit more from the bottom of the bus. So we can create a little control on the front and back of the bus to give it a little bit of this kind of twisting, so we can get some cartoony kind of stuff going on this way. And the last one I want to add is one more bend deformer. So again, I'll just go into the driver and bus, and it's going to be a bend, but going through the length of the bus this way. So let's see, what is that going to give us? So 90 and 90. Yeah, so we can kind of get things kind of really twisting this way, which is kind of cool. And again, we could actually rotate through that, which is fun. But we probably don't need to do that so much. Alright, so I'm going to save this into little snippets. So this is going to be part 1. Part 2, what we're going to do is start setting up our controls and making our connections between everything. We also need to make connections so that our tires and these mirrors here are connected in. And I think for these are going to be relatively simple to do. And then the last thing we'll do is just hook up any additional connections, like getting our tires to rotate properly based off of the units. Basically, the units will drive the rotation, essentially, so that the tires are always rotating properly when they're contacting the ground. Cool, I don't know what this is. It looks like maybe it's from a turntable camera. Let me get rid of that stuff there. Cool. Alright, so I'm going to stop the video here. This is part 1, and then we'll continue on with part 2. If I can, there we go. And finish.